Well, good morning, everybody, and I want to say a welcome to everybody online, and if you're joining us there, I was so glad you're here with us this morning. Anybody started your Christmas wish list yet? Right? Does anybody remember the old, you got to be my age and older to remember this, but you remember the Sears wish book that used to come out, and man, what a day that was when that came in the mail, because you would flip through there and then start to circle in what you wanted. Of course, there was way too many ink marks on that catalog for what you'd ever get, but man, this is that time of year. There was a Christmas that I'll never forget. It was the most magical Christmas of my entire life, because that year I got, for Christmas, a full set of football pads. I'm not talking about just the helmet, okay? I'm not talking about just the shoulder pads. I mean, I'm saying like the full from head to toe football pads, and I thought that was the most amazing thing. But on top of that, I also got a standing globe. Not just any globe, it was one of those globes that had the raised relief, you know, where you could feel the mountains and all that. And I just thought, oh man, this is it. This is the Christmas. And for some reason, that one sank into me as like the most amazing Christmas ever because of all that I got that year. Now, my birthday is in December. And I used to get a lot in December, a whole year's worth, right? Anybody else have a December birthday at all? Okay, so some people, they didn't like that. They didn't like that, you know, their birthday was kind of shared with Christmas. I always loved it because you always got all this dumped on you all at once. And I remember between my birthday and Christmas, my parents, they would, help me figure out from all the cash that I got, they would help me figure out what? They were Christian parents, and so they would help me figure out, okay, what is 10% of all the money that you got? And so we would figure that out. And so if I got $100, they would help me count out, okay, 10% is $10. And I used to love, as a little kid, being able to do that because I was participating in what I thought was kind of an adult thing, right? I got to do what the adults were doing, and so I would take my money, and I remember whenever those offering plates would be passed by, I remember getting to be able to participate in that, and it usually only happened once a year. But at the same time, whenever they would figure out $10, I also kind of didn't like that as a kid either, right? Because I would want to spend that $10 on something else, you know, that I wanted. And so there was this kind of thing, this struggle that I went through even as a little kid. And even as a little kid, there was a lie that I struggled with. And it was this, and this is what we're going to talk about today, that the quality of my life is based on accumulation. From a very early age, I started that, and I think we all at least hear that lie in our lives. Now, we're going to do a 3-week series about generosity right now, and I think it's timely as we enter this Christmas season, right? As Christians, we always have this kind of weird dichotomy with Christmas, right? It's almost like Charlie Brown, where we're struggling with that Christmas isn't just about being the commercial, season, right? That it's got to be something much more than that. Well, as Christians, we know that it is. Listen, there's almost nothing that can ruin a person's life deeper than greed. But on the other hand, there's almost no better cure for that than generosity. A life of greed and a life of generosity have two very different paths and two very different outcomes. I mean, we all remember the story of Adam and Eve, the first humans to exist. They had two sons, Cain, who was the oldest, he was the firstborn, and then Abel, he was the second one, he was the younger one. And we know that in chapter 3, if you open up to Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to be in chapter 4 today, but if you open up to Genesis chapter 3, we see the fall of mankind. But then in chapter 4, what we're going to see is the fall of the family. If in chapter 3, we see that sin was introduced into the world, in chapter 4, we see the impact of that sin on the family. And so in chapter 3, Adam and Eve, they put the me before he, right? They put themselves on the throne, and that filtered down into their family, unfortunately, in chapter 4. And so I want you to look at Genesis chapter 4 and verse 2. It says this, "Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil." So Abel was a rancher, and Cain was a farmer, right? In the course of time, in verse 3, in the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. So first of all, you might think that the Lord prefers ranchers over farmers. Do we have any farmers in here today? I grew up on a farm, right? I can tell you that that farming is hard work. Ranching, the way that we did ranching and farming in the same year, and so we couldn't calve in the summertime whenever it was a little easier. We always had to do it in the dead of winter time. I mean, it's 20 degrees blowing 100 mile an hour. Nobody likes that. If I had a choice, I would rather farm than ranch the way that we did it. But God, look, he doesn't prefer ranchers over farmers because both gave an offering. But it wasn't what they gave. It was how they gave. Like sometimes in life, the important thing is the what, right? It doesn't matter as much how you do it, it's that you did it, right? Like if you're going someplace, sometimes it doesn't matter which road you traveled to get there, so long as you showed up, you got there. And sometimes it's the opposite. It doesn't matter what as much as how. I was taking a test for my CDL, and I was up in Indiana taking this test, and I had sat down in this. I was in a bus and taking this test in a bus, and I was going through all the dynamics of the test, and I was acing it. I was getting everything right, just perfect. I had studied and studied and studied. And then there's this portion of the test that comes to the air brakes specifically. And in Indiana, they wanted to know, not only did you know how to check the air brakes, but they wanted to know if you knew how to do it in a certain order. And I can tell you confidently that the order does not matter for safety. They're independent things in the test. But they, for some reason, wanted you to do it in a certain order. Well, the problem for me was I had studied off of a YouTube video from a guy in Colorado. And Colorado does not care the order. So I got up there and I'm working through the air brakes and I do it in the wrong order that Indiana wants it in. The guy taps my shoulder and he says, "I'm sorry, we have to end the test." And I said, "Well, why?" He said, "You failed." And I said, what did I do to automatically fail me? And he said, "You did the order out of order." And I said, "What, is that just like a nick on my score?" And he said, "No, it's an automatic fail." And I couldn't believe it. They wanted to know that you knew how to do it in the order that they wanted you to do it. So the next time, of course, I did it in the order that they wanted, and because I knew it, and then I passed it, right? Sometimes it's not what you do, it's how you do it that matters. Both Cain and Abel were both generous. Did you notice that? They both gave an offering. But when it comes to generosity to God, the how outweighs the what. I mean, they both started off right. They both realized that God had been generous to them, and they were both giving back to God. Both guys brought an offering, and both sacrificed from what they had to God. And there's nothing in the text that would suggest that God preferred an animal to grain. Rather, the focus was on the man himself. And God knew the heart behind the gift, and he could see the difference. And the big difference was this. Cain brought some of the fruits. And then Abel also brought an offering. It says his was the fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. See, Abel, he said the fat portions, right? What is that? That is the best that he had. He wanted to bring to God the best that he had. And what does that do? If you give somebody the best that you have, that brings honor. He was trying to honor God. God had honored him by providing for him in his life, and so he wanted to honor God by giving the fat portions. The other thing that it says is that he brought from the firstborn of his flock. See, when you do that, you don't know what's coming later. If you bring the firstborn of your flock, you don't necessarily know that there's going to be more after that. What you're doing is you're placing not only honor by bringing the fat portions, but you're also placing trust. That whenever you give from the very first of what you have, you're placing trust that God is going to continue to provide. So with Abel, it was a matter of he wanted to honor God from his heart and show that he trusted God. Whereas Cain was much different. Cain gave some of the fruits. Cain's heart was in a totally different place. Cain was trying to fulfill a duty. And which isn't all bad, right? Doing the right things, even with a begrudged heart, isn't 100% bad. There's obviously worse things. But if we do the right thing with the wrong heart, it's not counted to us as righteousness. There was a kid that was he went to a store, and he said that he wanted to buy his mom a birthday present. And so he asked to see all the cookie jars. And so the store clerk took him over there and showed him the shelf of cookie jars. So he starts down the line, and he starts and opens and closes the lid, each one. And he gets all the way down and gets to the very last one, and he opens it and he closes it, and then he's disappointed. And he turns to the clerk and he says, "Is there no cookie jars with lids that don't make noise?" Doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons, right? Abel's offering was a display of honor and trust, and Cain's offering was a display of fulfilling a chore. In the end, motives matter. Abel gave an offering to honor God. Cain gave an offering to pacify God. Much different. Jesus spoke a lot about money. In more than 25% of his parables, he speaks about money. Now, listen, some people are going to say, okay, there it is. There it is. See, Christianity, its pastors, and even Jesus, they're concerned more about your money than anything else. They're just trying to get us to empty our wallets. Now, look, I'm going to be honest. Speaking to the subject of money from stage is a tricky thing. Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, right? He wrote most of the New Testament, but he did not take a salary from the church for that reason. That he wanted to be able to speak the truth without the accusation that he was taking advantage of the people. I do take a salary from the church. And if the church stopped giving today, I would not be able to do this any longer. So I get it. It can be suspect from somebody who wants to see it that way. But the truth is, the reason that Jesus spoke so much about the money, the subject of money, was because it might be the number one barometer of our values. Whatever our money goes to, it shows what our heart goes to. And it's your heart that Jesus wants. Look, if I could create cotton candy out of thin air, okay? And if I could create cotton candy out of thin air and I give you some. And I say, but as a thank you, I want you to take a portion of what I just gave you and I want you to give it back to me, right? It's not the cotton candy that I would want. That's just the method to show your gratefulness. Because I don't need cotton candy because I can create cotton candy anytime I want, right? That's a silly illustration to show that God doesn't want or need our money. Nothing about that is anything that he would need. He doesn't want that. What he wants is our heart. And we might want to pretend, right, that our faith and our finances are isolated from each other. But God knows that they are conjoined twins. For example, John the Baptist, this guy must have been some kind of preacher because he's out there preaching in the desert, not in the city where everybody's easily able to get to him. And yet everybody goes out to the desert to him, traveling from all over to hear this guy preach. And they get there and they hear his preaching and their lives are changed. And they ask him, they say, John, put this into application for my life. What does it mean for my life? And look at what he says here. In Luke chapter 3, verse 10, it said, what should we do then? The crowd asked. And John answered, anyone who has 2 shirts should share with the one who has none. And anyone who has food should do the same. And then it says, even tax collectors came to be baptized. And it said, teacher, they asked, what should we do? And he said, don't collect any more than you're required to, he told them. Then some soldiers asked him, what should we do? And he replied, don't extort money or accuse people falsely. Be content with your pay. Every single answer that he gave, it related to money and possessions, but nobody asked about that. What we do with our money absolutely reveals our heart. And so when we look back at Abel's gift, the fat portions and the firstborn, his generosity welled up from a heart of gratefulness for what God had given him. Cain was trying to maintain control by giving some of the fruits. in case he didn't have a good crop the next year. Well, he only gave some, so he's got some stockpiled up. He's got a safety net, right? If things didn't go to plan, he had some cushion there. Abel was trying to show honor and trust with his offering, which was the whole point of the offering. But Cain had believed the lie that the quality of his life was based on accumulation. Listen, if you've ever been on a mission trip to some place in the world that doesn't have anything, you already know about this. You already know that some of the happiest and most content people on the earth have nothing. I mean, guys, I've sat in people's homes that's no bigger than my office with no concrete floors, dirt floors, no electricity, and no running water. And yet we laughed together and they were generous with me with their own food and drink. And that's impossible, right? If that lie is true, it's not a lie and it's true, that would be impossible. That for them to sit there and be happy and content would be impossible if the quality of their life was determined by their accumulation. Listen, it's a lie, and it tries to keep us from the very best things in our life. So there's a couple huge takeaways for us, and both have to do with the heart of the gift. And the number one thing is this: be generous to honor God and to trust God. When we are generous, do it for those reasons, to show honor and to show trust. This is your fat portions, your first fruits. If you really want to honor the Lord, be generous with a grateful heart. Paul nailed this idea in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7. He said this: each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. Who was that? See, that was Cain. For God loves a cheerful giver. Who was that? Right? That was Abel. Look, I'm grateful for my parents that they showed me early to take the first 10% and give it back to God, right? They didn't say, well, Brian, let's see, what else was on your list that you didn't get? Let's take a look at that and see, okay, well, you got this left. We might be able to get that with the rest of your money, and then if we have anything left after that, we'll be able to give that to the Lord. No, they didn't do that. They said, here's what you got. Let's take 10%, and then the rest of it you can use for that purpose. And look, it turned out okay. I had enough toys. I wasn't deprived of anything. In the end, I was so grateful to them to put that into my life early on, and to help me see that. God honored you by giving you what you need, and most of us, we have way more than what we need. We have a lot of our wants. Man, I trust to my core that God is going to take care of my needs. You know why? Because he's done it like 1,000 times already. And he'll do it again. I have never outgiven God. I have never out-honored God. And I have not trusted God too much. When it's all over with, none of us are going to say that I was too generous to God. None of us are going to say that I honored God too much or that I trusted God too much. Here's the other huge takeaway for us. Give from a heart of gratitude, not to a project that we like. See, Cain tried to keep control of his gift, which totally defeated the purpose of giving the offering. And did you notice what it said about those gifts when it said the Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering? See, God looked with favor on Abel and then his offering because Abel's heart was right? This word here, this favor word, the Old Testament was written in the Hebrew, right? So the Hebrew language there for that word means respect. That Abel had respected God, shown respect to God, and so God respected him. But Cain, it was quite the opposite. God did not respect what he had to give. There's an author, a Bible professor named James Smith, and he absolutely nailed this whole message in one sentence. And he said this: the offerer, all right, the one who's making the offerer is put before the offering. When it comes to Cain, the offerer is put before the offering. Cain's attitude rendered his offering unacceptable. And man, how unfortunate, right? Because he gave a gift. He did what he was supposed to do, but he did it with the wrong heart. And so it wasn't accepted. Man, it is a dangerous thing to give and then stipulate what should happen with that gift. We cannot say that this is a gift to honor the Lord, to show trust in God, but you must use it in the way that I say. When we do that, we put ourselves in Cain's shoes. And the offerer is put before the offering. Give from, not to. We don't wait until there's a project that we like, and then we'll give. We give because we're grateful for what God has done in our lives. Now, let me tell you about a project that is happening with the generosity of the church. The bonus is that our generosity changes lives. And right now, we're trying to do something special in this town. We're trying to do something special by uplifting our kids' programming and our students' programming so that when a family comes in and they bring their kids, that they want to take their kids back there, and in the back, they see that their kids see something that is going to wow them, see something that's going to make them want to be back there. We want adults, loving adults back there with our kids and with our students that's going to embrace these kids, that's going to engage with these kids, that's going to affirm these students and mobilize their faith. That's what we're trying to do. We want every kid to know that they matter. And so right now to the end of the year, you've heard me talk about it. We've got a Next Gen campaign going on. And what that is that whatever you give above and beyond your regular giving, somebody has offered to match that gift up to $50,000. And so if we were able to do that, we would be able to put $100,000 into those rooms already. Now, we've already done a little bit. Somebody gave $1,500 just to get us started. And you know what we did with that? We didn't sit on it. We already spent it. We already spent it because they had a real need back there for curriculum. And right now, as we speak, they're back there using it. And the teachers have said that they love it. It's already better with just $1,500 back there. We have a plan ready to go. Ready to go. Now, you're probably saying, well, you just said not to give to a project, yet you just told us a project to give to. Listen, I'm asking you to give from a heart of gratitude for what God has done in your life. This may be a project that you love, or maybe it's a project that you don't really connect with. Look, nobody likes paying the electric bill, but it's got to be paid. I'm asking you to stretch yourself to trust God like Abel did, to give out of a heart of gratefulness to God. Let me end with this. I recently saw a video that came from, you remember the earthquake earlier this year in Turkey and Syria, that big, giant, like a 7.8 magnitude earthquake. A lot of people died in it. It was quite sad. And as they were trying to recover and rescue people there, hours matter. And so the first day goes by, and after that, the probability of finding people alive goes way down. Well, after 40 hours of being trapped in the rubble where they couldn't save themselves, right? They just couldn't get out. There was a whole family that was trapped in there. And they heard through tapping or yelling or something that there was some people that was alive in there after 40 hours. And so naturally, all these people gathered together and try to, just see what's going to happen here. And they sent somebody in there to, they're digging out rubble. It takes some time, but they sent somebody small in there, and they were finally able to locate it. And they brought these family members out alive, all of them alive, and the whole crowd just goes wild. And I remember watching that. It made me emotional seeing that, right? And I immediately think that I'm the guy that was rescued. That was me. That I was buried in my own sin and I couldn't make it out. I could not get myself out of that. And yet I was the one that was rescued. Check out this video. Why do we give? It's because we were those kids. Nobody could have got us out of that except for Jesus. Nobody. I could never have gotten myself out of my sin problem. I could never do that. But Jesus came for me. What do I owe Jesus? What do I owe him if not my entire life? I owe him everything. And so when it comes to me giving back a portion of what he has given to me, how could I not give it back in that same attitude of praise and thanksgiving for what he has done? To do nothing less than to cheer back to God saying, thank you for what you have given me. It is not the what. It is the how in which I give. And I want to be a giver like that gives with a grateful heart. We could not get ourselves out. We could not save ourselves. Only He was able to do that. Only Him. We should be generous with a grateful heart, with a heart of cheering to honor God. Be generous to show your gratitude to God. It will kill greed in your life, and you will be better for it. Listen, if God has done anything for you, show Him your gratitude. I'm going to pray, and we're going to sing a couple worship songs. It'd be a perfect time to stand up and declare your honor back to God, to sing to Him praise and thanksgiving back to Him. Let me pray.